Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever been in a room where something as simple as the tone of someone's voice or a gesture seemed to trigger a deep, almost primal reaction within you? Where the feeling that followed wasn't just annoyance, but a slow boil of frustration you couldn't easily shake off. The feeling that something deep within was disturbed, something you couldn't name but knew it was there. Let me tell you a story. There's a woman I once knew, a coworker. She was the kind of person who would always show up in the office with a smile, but it wasn't the warm, genuine smile that would brighten your day. It was forced, rehearsed, the kind that felt like an apology before you even spoke to her. You see, she carried a burden, though none of us knew it at first. It was only later, after her abrupt departure, that we found out she'd been facing some serious family troubles. The facade she wore to cover her pain, it inadvertently irritated everyone she came into contact with. Her smile felt like a reminder of the emotional walls we were all trying to keep up. And no matter how much we tried to understand, it still felt like a disruption in the calm of our own worlds. Now, imagine you're that person, the one carrying invisible demons, the weight of hidden struggles, and every day you face the unintentional irritation of people around you who unknowingly poke at that pain. Can you relate? Here's the truth. We all have demons within us, whether they're past traumas, unresolved conflicts, or the burdens of daily life that most people can't see. And sometimes, the smallest things, an eye roll, a dismissive tone, a lack of patience can stir these demons into a fury. It's not intentional, it's not about malice, but the impact is real. Have you ever found yourself reacting to something so trivial and wondered why? Maybe someone spoke over you, or didn't acknowledge your presence, or made an offhand comment that sent your mind spiraling. That was their irritating the demons moment, and they didn't even know it. You see, irritation in people isn't just about being annoying or inconsiderate. It's about the subtle shifts in energy that provoke something inside. And when you irritate someone's inner demons, you force them to face something they aren't ready to confront. It's a ripple effect that can start with the smallest action, and if unchecked, can lead to waves of emotional turmoil. Now, we have to ask ourselves, much control do we have over this? How much power do we really hold over the way we affect others? It's easy to assume we are the ones simply reacting to people around us, but in reality, we also contribute to the emotional ecosystem. We can either be the ones who trigger someone's demons or the ones who soothe them. The key is self-awareness. When we are mindful of how we communicate and present ourselves, we can avoid unknowingly stepping into someone's emotional minefield. We need empathy to understand that even the smallest gestures or words can cut deep. You might never see the wounds you've created, but they exist. And every time we irritate someone's demons, we push them further into their internal struggle. I know it's not always easy to control our reactions. We are all human after all, and we all have our moments where we snap, react impulsively, or let frustration get the best of us. But it's in those moments of tension that we have the most power to make a choice, to walk away, to speak with kindness, to act with patience. What would happen if we all took a step back and asked ourselves before we acted? Am I going to irritate someone's demons today? Or could I be the one who helps them find peace? The way we treat people, the energy we bring into the room can either soothe or provoke, and it's in our hands to choose which side we stand on. It's in our capacity to change the way we interact with the world, to create spaces of understanding rather than conflict. So, I challenge you today, the next time you feel yourself about to irritate someone's demons, take a moment. Ask yourself, is this truly necessary? Is it worth feeding the fire? In those moments, you have the power to either escalate a situation or diffuse it. And that choice can make all difference. Our behavior has a profound effect on the people around us, sometimes in ways we don't even realize. It's easy to assume that we're simply living our lives and others are just reacting to us as we go about our day. But what we often overlook is the energy we bring into a room, the tone of our voice, the words we choose, or even our body language, and how all of these things can have a significant impact on those around us. At times, that impact can be subtle, but at other times, it can trigger something much deeper, in others, something that we may never see or understand, but which can stir emotions in them that are difficult to control. When we speak about irritating the demons in people, what we are really discussing is the invisible emotional and psychological triggers that others may carry within them. Every person has their own internal battles, the scars of past experiences, the unresolved emotions, and the personal struggles they deal with daily. Sometimes these struggles are so deeply embedded that they are hidden from view, not just from the outside world, but even from the person themselves. These demons might manifest as fears, insecurities, anxieties, or deep-seated griefs, all of which can be easily provoked. What makes it particularly tricky is that these demons aren't something we can see. We don't know the full extent of what others are going through unless they share it with us, and often they won't. People, by nature, tend to protect themselves from showing vulnerability. And so, we may never fully understand the internal chaos someone else is managing until something we say or do causes an emotional reaction that, in some cases, seems disproportionate to the situation. That's when we realize, or should realize, that we've inadvertently touched a nerve. Take, for example, the subtle art of sarcasm. For many, sarcasm is a way of expressing humor or frustration. But for others, it can feel like an emotional attack, especially if they're already dealing with feelings of inadequacy or being dismissed. In such cases, a sarcastic comment, whether intended in good fun or not, can serve as a reminder of all the ways they feel unseen or unappreciated. For someone who struggles with self-worth, a sarcastic comment may not be taken lightly, but instead as a painful confirmation of their worst fears. This is where the invisible demons come into play. What might feel like a harmless remark to us can be an emotional landmine for someone else. Similarly, the way we engage in conversations can unknowingly trigger negative reactions in people. Perhaps you have a colleague who constantly interrupts others in meetings, or a friend who always needs to one-up your stories. You might think nothing of it. Perhaps you feel irritated, but you shake it off. But for someone who has struggled with feeling unheard, feeling overlooked, or even silenced in other parts of their life, this behavior may feel like a direct hit to their emotional stability. What seems like a minor annoyance to you might cause them to withdraw, or worse, react defensively. The emotional triggers we all carry are far more fragile than we often realize. Our own stress and emotions can also influence the way we interact with others. When we're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or angry, our energy tends to spill over into our interactions. We may snap at someone for something insignificant, or we may withdraw completely, leaving others feeling confused and rejected. This might irritate the demons in someone else, their fears of abandonment, their insecurities, their tendency to feel like they are never enough. They may wonder why they've been treated this way, internalize it, and carry it with them long after the interaction is over. What's important to realize is that all of these things are not intentional. We aren't always consciously choosing to aggravate someone else's demons. We may not even know they exist, but the effect is real. These triggers are very much alive, and when we poke at them, even unknowingly, we disturb something fragile within the other person. Sometimes that disturbance can be a momentary irritant, something that fades away quickly, but other times it can lead to an emotional explosion or a longer-lasting sense of hurt. To navigate this delicate terrain, we need to begin with an understanding of our own power, how much influence we have over others' emotions and reactions. We need to recognize that the way we speak, act, and even react can affect someone else's emotional state in ways we might not expect. Our actions and words can either soothe the invisible wounds of others or, on the contrary, stir them up in ways that we may not fully comprehend. So, while we are not always responsible for the demons others carry, we are responsible for the way we engage with them. Each of us can choose to be more mindful, to consider how our behavior might affect those around us, and to be more empathetic in our daily interactions. Even if we don't know the depth of someone's internal struggles, we can approach them with kindness and awareness, treating their emotional fragility with respect. In the end, our ability to recognize and adjust our behavior to avoid irritating the demons in others is not just about avoiding conflict, it's about fostering understanding and compassion. It's about realizing that we're all walking around carrying invisible burdens, and that the way we interact with each other can either help lighten those loads or add weight to them. In a world where so many of us struggle silently, it's up to us to decide how we will impact the emotional lives of those around us. And ideally, we should choose to help them heal, not hurt. Every person you encounter is carrying something that you can't see, a burden that shapes the way they interact with the world. These are not physical scars, but emotional and psychological weights that have accumulated over time. They could be unresolved issues from childhood, the painful sting of a broken relationship, or the fear of failure that gnaws at someone's confidence. Whatever form these burdens take, they are deeply personal and often invisible to others. Yet, they are constantly at play in every interaction a person has, influencing how they react to people, situations, and circumstances. One of the most profound aspects of the human experience is that we are often unaware of the invisible struggles others are dealing with. We walk past people every day, your colleagues, friends, and even strangers, without knowing that they may be carrying burdens that weigh heavily on their hearts and minds. These emotional weights, though invisible, are just as real and powerful as physical pain. They affect how someone thinks, feels, and behaves, and in turn, they influence their responses to the world around them. A person who is struggling with grief, for example, may react more defensively to a critical remark than someone who is emotionally balanced. A person who feels unworthy or inadequate may be more likely to interpret neutral comments as personal attacks. In many cases, these internal struggles are so deeply ingrained that the person dealing with them might not even recognize them for what they are. They might have learned to push the pain away or to cover it up with a facade of strength or indifference. These invisible burdens can become so normalized that the person may not even know how to articulate what's wrong. They live with a constant undercurrent of anxiety, sadness, or frustration, but they may struggle to express these feelings. As a result, they internalize their struggles, often believing that they are alone in their pain or that no one would understand if they tried to explain it. This is where things become complicated. When we interact with others, we're often focused on our own emotions and needs. We bring our own baggage, our own experiences, and our own perspectives into every conversation. We may be unaware of the emotional state of the other person, and as a result, we may inadvertently trigger something inside them that we didn't expect. A simple comment that seems harmless to us might be the last straw for someone who is already carrying a heavy emotional load. Something as small as a glance, a sarcastic tone, or a rushed response can tap into someone's hidden insecurities or unresolved fears, triggering an emotional reaction that feels disproportionate to the situation. Take, for instance, a person who has struggled with abandonment in their past. Perhaps they lost a parent at a young age or went through a difficult breakup. For them, any form of perceived neglect or emotional distance from others may trigger feelings of abandonment, even if those feelings are not consciously acknowledged. A friend who cancels plans at the last minute might not just be seen as unreliable, but as someone who is reinforcing that deeply ingrained fear of being left behind. The emotional burden of abandonment becomes so tightly woven into the fabric of their identity that they may not recognize that the reaction they're having is tied to something from their past. Another example can be found in the workplace. Someone who has faced criticism or rejection in their professional life might feel particularly sensitive to feedback. What might seem like constructive criticism to one person may feel like a personal attack to another, who has internalized feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt. The person giving the feedback may be completely unaware of the other's history or emotional triggers, and the recipient may not be able to explain why they feel so wounded. But inside, the emotional burden of past failures or perceived shortcomings has created a vulnerable space, making even the smallest comment feel like a weight they're unable to carry. What's important to understand is that these burdens are not temporary. They become a part of a person's emotional landscape. Even though we may not be able to see these invisible struggles, they influence the way people experience and respond to the world around them. And while these burdens may not define a person entirely, they shape their interactions, their perceptions, and their emotional responses. What's even more crucial is that these emotional burdens are not something people consciously want others to bear witness to. They're not badges of honor or things that anyone would openly share in everyday conversation. In fact, most people will go to great lengths to hide these burdens, to avoid appearing weak or vulnerable. As a result, when they're triggered, they can feel like a deeply personal attack, even if it's unintentional. The person might not have the tools to explain why something bothers them so much, and they may choose to retreat, lash out, or bury their feelings further. Ultimately, the reason it's so important to recognize that everyone carries invisible burdens is that it encourages a sense of compassion and awareness in our interactions. It requires us to understand that what may seem like a minor issue or a passing comment to us could be the catalyst for a much deeper emotional reaction in someone else. If we can acknowledge that each person is carrying a weight we can't see, we are more likely to treat others with patience, kindness, and empathic qualities that can help reduce the impact of those invisible burdens and, hopefully, create an environment where healing is possible. When small irritations are allowed to fester, they can transform into something far more significant, causing emotional distress and a lasting impact. The power of these minor triggers lies in their ability to build up over time, often unnoticed, until they overwhelm the person experiencing them. This process is something many people don't recognize until they're facing the emotional fallout of something they thought was insignificant. Small acts of irritation, whether intentional or unintentional, don't just disappear after the moment has passed. They accumulate, leaving a trail of unresolved emotions that can significantly affect one's mental and emotional state. Consider a situation where a person consistently experiences minor slights in their daily life, perhaps. A coworker repeatedly interrupts them during meetings. A friend habitually cancels plans at the last minute, or a partner dismisses their feelings without realizing it. Each instance may seem small on its own, something that can be brushed off or forgiven with little thought. However, when these moments continue to happen, they begin to erode the person's sense of self-worth and patience. The irritation starts small, but it begins to grow as the individual internally ruminates over these seemingly insignificant events, wondering why they continue to occur. Over time, these irritations accumulate and transform into a larger sense of frustration or resentment. The person starts to feel unheard, undervalued, or unappreciated, and that emotional burden becomes heavier with each new instance. The impact of these small acts of irritation is compounded by the lack of resolution. When we don't address the underlying feelings or communicate our discomfort, they continue to build up, often leading to more intense emotional reactions in the future. What might have been a mild annoyance one day could become a full-blown argument or breakdown in the future if the person pushed past their limit. Take, for example, a relationship where communication is often lacking or dismissive. One partner may regularly make sarcastic remarks, belittle the other's opinions, or fail to listen when the other person is speaking. While these actions may seem like minor transgressions in the moment, over time, they chip away at the trust and emotional connection between the partners. The person on the receiving end of these irritations may try to brush it off at first, convincing themselves that it's not a big deal. But after a while, they begin to internalize these interactions, feeling that their voice doesn't matter. or that they are constantly being undermined. What started as a simple irritation has now become a deeper emotional wound, one that may lead to anger, bitterness, or emotional withdrawal. These small irritations are dangerous because they can often be mistaken for trivial annoyances, leading us to dismiss their significance. However, these seemingly small moments have the potential to set off a chain reaction of negative emotions. When left unaddressed, they can evolve into patterns of behavior that create even more damage over time. The person who feels continuously irritated may begin to withdraw emotionally, become more reactive, or even start to harbor grudges. And because these irritations are often so small, they might not seem worth discussing in the moment, making it all the more likely that the issue will be left unresolved. This process is not just limited to interpersonal relationships. It can happen in any area of life where repeated small irritations are ignored. In the workplace, for example, constant microaggressions or minor disrespect from coworkers can lead to a toxic environment where everyone feels on edge. One person may feel overlooked when their ideas are not acknowledged, or they may be frustrated by the constant interruptions in meetings. These irritations might not seem like a big deal individually, but over time, they can affect productivity, morale, and team cohesion. Employees may become disengaged, passive-aggressive, or even disengage entirely from their work, all because of these small but persistent annoyances that have gone unchecked. Similarly, in friendships or family dynamics, minor frustrations that aren't addressed can slowly erode trust and intimacy. A friend who constantly cancels plans or is late without apology can inadvertently make the other person feel unimportant, even though that might not be their intention. The emotional toll of these repeated irritations can lead to feelings of neglect or resentment. Over time, these emotions can accumulate, and the person who is constantly irritated may begin to distance themselves from the friendship, even if they don't fully understand why they're feeling that way. What's critical in these situations is the lack of resolution. When irritations are acknowledged or communicated, they don't simply disappear. Instead, they build up, creating emotional clutter that can cloud a person's ability to see the relationship or situation clearly. Instead of dealing with each irritation as it arises, the individual begins to accumulate feelings of resentment, which in turn can distort their perception of the person or situation causing the irritation. What might have been a minor annoyance at one point becomes a major emotional burden. And when this burden is carried for too long, it can lead to more drastic actions or breakdowns. The process of irritation building up into something larger also speaks to the importance of emotional self-regulation. When we allow ourselves to be repeatedly irritated without addressing it, we run the risk of suppressing our emotions, which can lead to emotional exhaustion. This exhaustion can make it even harder to cope with future irritations, creating a cycle of frustration that seems impossible to break. Recognizing the significance of these small irritations and taking steps to address them early on is crucial to preventing them from snowballing into larger emotional issues. The key to breaking this cycle lies in awareness and communication. By recognizing that small irritations can accumulate into larger emotional issues, we can be more intentional in addressing them before they have a chance to build up. It's essential to acknowledge how our own actions may affect others and to create an environment where open communication is encouraged. By addressing even the smallest irritations before they have the chance to accumulate, we can prevent them from turning into bigger issues that harm relationships or emotional well-being. In conclusion, the impact of our interactions with others, especially when it comes to irritating the demons within them, cannot be overstated. Whether it's a small act of thoughtlessness or a pattern of behavior that goes unnoticed, every word, gesture, and reaction carries weight. We must understand the emotional baggage that others carry and recognize how easily small irritations can accumulate, triggering deeper emotional responses and causing lasting effects. By cultivating awareness, empathy, and compassion, we can choose to be a source of peace rather than discomfort in those around us. As we move forward, Let's take the time to be mindful of how our actions influence others and make an effort to handle conflicts and irritations with patience and understanding. The world doesn't need more negativity, it needs more kindness, more thoughtful consideration, and more efforts to heal rather than harm.